Hello learners, I welcome you to my YouTube channel Dr. Anu's Literary Calibre. Today we are going to see about Jacques Lacan's The Insistence of the Letter in the Unconscious. Jacques Marie Émile Lacan, born on April 13, 1901 and lived until September 9, 1981, is a French psychoanalyst. He is one of the most influential theorists of the 1970s and 1980s. His works have had an extraordinary influence on many aspects of recent literary theories. Lacan is influenced by Freud and Saussure. He interprets Freud by combining post-structuralist theories and psychoanalysis. Lacan provides a radical rereading and rewriting of the text of Freud. He explains human psyche by comparing it with something that exists at the concrete level. He explains the structure of the unconscious by comparing it with the structure of language. He says that unconscious is structured like language. Lacan's views on human psyche. Human psyche is divided into infinite number of psychic structures. Some of the psychic structures may be analogous, and the psychic structures respond identically to identical psychic situations. It is called stimulus or impulse in classical psychology. Lacan's importance is in his theory about acquisition of language. Let's now have a glimpse on the insistence of the letter in the unconscious. His famous essay, The Insistence of the Letter in the Unconscious, was originally delivered as a lecture at Sorbonne in 1957 and published in an annual volume called La Psychoanalysis, edited by Lacan. Let's see some interesting facts about this essay. The first point is, there is no getting outside language. Language is innately figurative. It is not transparently referential. Human subject is constituted precisely by the entry into language. The Christian humanist idea of an autonomous individual self or soul that transcends the limits of language is a fallacy and an illusion. Lacan's reaction to Saussure's assumption. Lacan questions Saussure's assumption that there is nothing problematic about the bond between the signifier and the signified in a verbal sign. He provides us an example. The two signifiers, ladies and gentlemen, may refer to the same signified or be interpreted as apparently contradictory place names. Lacan explains that his changed concept consists of two doors. One is labeled ladies and the other as gentlemen. These two doors are signifiers which denote one signified or concept of water closet. This shows that the same signifier may have different signifieds. Only the correlations between the signifier and the signified supply the standard of all research into meanings. Hence, we are forced to accept the notion of an incessant sliding of the signified under the signifier. There is nothing that ultimately gives meaning for the stability to the whole system. One signifier only leads to another signifier and never to a signified. It is like a dictionary where one word only leads to more words but never to the ultimate meaning. This essay constitutes three parts. They are the meaning of the letter, letter in the unconscious, being the letter and the other. Let's now see some interesting facts about the first part, the meaning of the letter. Lacan analyzes the importance of the letter in the unconscious. He says that letter is the minimal unit of a language and speech is possible only by using these letters. Every individual makes use of language to make speech. Language has existed before the individual makes an entry into it. So it is said that the relationship of the unconscious with the letter has great significance. Let's now see Lacan's views on signifier and signified. The signifier is the object, the word, the image or action, whereas the signified is the concept behind the object that is being represented. For example, the cross symbol is a signifier on a simple basis because it is two lines crossed over one another. A signified is the idea or concept associated with the signifier, which together constitute the linguistic sign. These elements, which come from Ferdinand de Saussure's linguistic theory, were introduced and problematized in the field of psychoanalysis by Jacques Lacan during his return to Freud phase in early 1950s. Lacan relied on the following main points of Saussure's structural model. A signifier, an element of language, is a material representation of a linguistic sign. In psychoanalysis, it is a phonemic sequence of the discourse that intervenes in conscious and unconscious processes to determine the subject engaged in the discourse. The use of language is one of the peculiarities of human societies, and this can be made clear by the ternary, that is a threefold conception of human condition, that is nature, society and culture. In order to understand how the signifier and signified relate to each other, one must be able to interpret signs. That is, a sign can only be understood when the relationship between the two components that make up the sign are agreed upon. Saussure argued that a sign's meaning depends on its relation to other words within the system. For example, to understand an individual word such as tree, one must also understand the word bush and how the two relate to each other. It is this difference from other signs that allows the possibility of a speech community. Lacan strikes at the basic concept of Saussure. The sign is composed of a signifier and signified, using tree as an example. Here, a drawing of a tree functions as a signified, that is the concept image. In order to understand how the signifier and signified relate to each other, one must be able to interpret signs. Saussure argued that a sign's meaning depends on its relation to other words within the system. For example, to understand an individual word such as tree, one must also understand the word bush and how the two relate to each other. It is this difference from other signs that allows the possibility of a speech community. However, we need to remember that signifiers and their significance change all the time, becoming dated. It is in this way that we are all practicing semioticians who pay a great deal of attention to signs, even though we may never have heard them before. While words are the most familiar form signs take, they stand for many things within life, such as advertisement, objects, body language, music, and so on. Lacan's concept of metonymy and metaphor. Lacan borrowed this dichotomous metaphor or metonymy distinction from Jacobson and introduced it to the structure not only of the text and its meaning, but of the human subject and its unconscious, which he famously claimed to be structured like a language. Metaphor functions to suppress, while metonymy functions to combine. He writes, it is in the word-to-word connection that metonymy is based, and then one word for another, that is the formula of metaphor. Lacan has managed to juxtapose the metaphor-metonymy binary set with the binary set that Freud claimed to be the basic functions of the unconscious, that is the repression and displacement. Just as in language, the tropes of metaphor and metonymy serve to present ideas in forms greatly different from their original content, in the psychic realm, they offer the same function, thus rendering certain objects of the mind, thoughts, feelings, signifies, etc. unrecognizable to consciousness. According to Freud, the human mind consists of three levels, namely conscious, preconscious, and unconscious levels. He says conscious level constitutes thoughts and perceptions. On the other hand, preconscious level constitutes memories and stored knowledge, whereas unconscious level constitutes violent motives, immoral urges, fears, unacceptable sexual desires, irrational wishes, selfish needs, and shameful experiences, etc. Let's now see some interesting facts about the concepts discussed in Lacan's second part of the essay, Letter in the Unconscious. Lacan changes the attention from the conscious self to the unconscious as the kernel of our being. Here Lacan rewrites Freud's project. The structure of the language is used to interpret the dreams so that the structure of the unconscious and the structure of a dream can be related. Dream is just a signifier. Here, Lacan explains how he rereads the text of Freud. Imagination is used in the interpretation of dream, and a kind of relation is established between the object and the subject element in the unconscious and the dreamer. There is no similarity between Freudian psychology and psychological order. Lacan gives more importance to the metaphor than the metonymy. One signifier occupying the place of the signified. This leads to a kind of signifying chain. Only in thought a man has existence. It is his thought about himself that makes him a man. Lacan cites Descartes' view, I think, therefore I am. Let's now see some interesting facts discussed in the third part of his essay, entitled Being the Letter and the Other. According to Lacan, there are three phases in the evolution of human psyche. They are omelette stage, which comprises from birth to approximately 6 months. Next one is mirror stage, 6 months to 18 months. Third one is symbolic stage, that is after 18 months up to death. Let's see in detail about omelette stage. A child thinks that he or she is an inseparable part of his or her mother. There is no distinction between self and the other, that is between child and mother in this stage. It is a fluid stage. The child has no individuality at this stage, and its individuality depends on its mother, and the child has no maturity. Lacan says that language is always absent at this stage. Let's now see something about mirror stage. Mirror stage is based on the belief that infants recognize themselves in a mirror or other symbolic contraption which induces a perception, that is, the turning of oneself into an object that can be viewed by the child from outside themselves from the age of about 6 months. Initially, Lacan proposed that the mirror stage was part of an infant's development from 6 to 18 months, as outlined at the 14th International Psychoanalytical Congress at Marienbad in 1936. By the early 1950s, Lacan's concept of the mirror stage had evolved. He no longer considered the mirror stage as a moment in the life of the infant, but as representing a permanent structure of subjectivity or as the paradigm of imaginary order. This evolution in Lacan's thinking becomes clear in his later essay titled The Subversion of the Subject and the Dialectic of Desire. Lacan's concept of the mirror stage was strongly inspired by earlier work by psychologist Henry Whalen, who speculated based on observations of animals and humans responding to their reflections in mirrors. Whalen noted that by the age of about 6 months, human infants and chimpanzees both seemed to recognize their reflection in a mirror. While chimpanzees rapidly lose interest in the discovery, human infants typically become very interested and devote much time and effort to exploring the connections between their bodies and their images. In a 1931 paper, Valen argued that mirrors helped children develop a sense of self-identity. The child thinks that father is very powerful and eloquent in the exercise of language. So the language is the yardstick and also the source of authority. Then the child develops an innate urge to learn language to compete with father. This desire inspires him to acquire language. The acquisition of language is a source of power. It gives the child a kind of empowerment. However, later mirror test research indicates that while toddlers are usually fascinated by mirrors, they do not actually recognize themselves in mirrors until the age of 15 months at the earliest, leading psychoanalytically trained critic Norman N. Holland to declare that there is no evidence whatsoever for Lacan's notion of a mirror stage. The next one is the symbolic stage. The child connects ideas, emotions, situations and objects symbolically. So images and objects are symbolically related to ideas. It is also a mature stage of human psyche. Lacan says that there is symbolic order for language. The symbolic order is phallus. So language is a male-centered entity. This nature of language is called phallocentrism. Lacan believes that men are more proficient than women in the use of language, for language is phallocentric. Women have lack of phallus and this consciousness retards their exercise of language. To conclude, we can say that Lacan thus analyzes the unconscious through a linguistic methodology and considers the unconscious as structured system like language. His procedure is to recast Freud's key concept and mechanism into linguistic mode, viewing human mind not as pre-existent but as constituted by language. Lacanian psychoanalysis can thus be used to hypothesize a sort of social or political unconscious that manifests itself in literary text. Lacan's view of the conscious and the unconscious is better suited to feminist and Marxist adaptations than Freud's. Lacan's findings are evidences of his own views on language and on the process of psychoanalysis. If you found this video beneficial, kindly like, share and subscribe my YouTube channel Dr. Anu's Literary Calibre for more updates on English language and literature. Happy learning.